Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me. My name's Andy Delisi, and I am the Architecture and Design Rep for Envirotech Office Systems. If you haven't heard about Envirotech before, I'll give you a quick lowdown on what we do. So at Envirotech, we provide a very large spectrum of office furniture solutions, ranging from high-quality new furniture to cost-effective, remanufactured, and refurbished solutions. Not only are we the largest remanufactured office furniture dealer in Canada, but we're also a preferred dealer of more than 20 reputable North American manufacturers for new furniture. This makes us a one-stop shop for many of our clients. We're a full-service dealer. We start with installation drawings to professional installation services, office moves, value assessments. We also do recycling of existing furniture and trade-ins. We've been a leader in sustainability and the green movement since we started about 20 years ago. Now we're really starting to establish ourselves as a leader in wellness and the well-building standard, which really excites me, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be looking at where the need for well came from, the science behind well-being. Is well the new lead? How do they work hand in hand together? We're going to go through the process of how you become well certified. We're going to dive into each of the 7 concepts of the well building standard. And then finally, we're going to look a little bit at this movement towards B corporations, benefit corporations, and how this kind of ties in at the very end. So let's kick things off. So remember when we used to trust the food industry? Remember those days when you just walk into a grocery store and just assume everything was okay to eat? And then all of a sudden this organic food movement comes along and it's all pesticides, GMOs, trans fats, gluten-free, right? You grab a bag of potato chips now, you pick it up, first thing you see plastered front and center on the label is 100% gluten-free. Well, guess what? They're always gluten-free. They're potatoes, right? And in some ways, we've gone a little bit too far. But as consumers, we demanded that transparency from the food industry. We wanted to know what we were putting in our bodies, and the food industry adapted. In the same way, we are now demanding that same transparency from the buildings that we're spending a majority of our time in. So that's where well came from. It's providing this model for design and construction that integrates human health features into the built environment. It's performance-based, similar to LEED, and directly measures the impact of our built environment on our own health. And it's because we're spending about 90% of our lives indoors. 90% of our lives. 40% of our lives looking at screens. And what we don't always realize, though, is that every room we're in, I mean, the room you're in right now, the room that I'm in right now, it's having an effect on our bodies. It's having an effect on our cardiovascular system. It's having an effect on our respiratory system. It's going to affect how well we sleep tonight. So we need to get real about where we choose to spend our time. And there's a specific study in the field of genetics called epigenetics that actually shows that our genetic code can be actually turned on and off based on certain external environmental factors like air, water, stress. So much so down to our genetic level. And there was a famous study done in the US by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that looked at this and found that our zip code is actually a greater predictor of how long we will live than our genetic code. So as you can see here in this map, they did a study that looked at the average life expectancy of babies born to mothers in New Orleans in neighborhoods that were just a few miles apart. And in neighborhoods that were, less than 2 miles apart, the average life expectancy was on average 20 years less. So get real about where you choose to spend your time. And the well-building standard looks at not just unlocking human potential, but optimizing human potential through the built environment. So when the well-building standard started, it was founded by this guy, Paul Shalla, who was an ex-Goldman Sachs guy, ex-Wall Street guy, and he keeps hearing in his last 10 years of his Wall Street career this term come up, sustainability, sustainability, sustainability. And he thought, this is great. But he thought there was a miss. What about, he said, how these buildings that we're designing are interacting with the humans, the occupants inside? And so he founded a company called Delos, which pioneered the well building standard. And he essentially gets doctors, architects, and designers in the same room, and he goes, look, if you have to dream it up, what types of things could we do to introduce preventative medical intentions into the way that we design the spaces that we spend a majority of our time in? And it came along with this trend of wellness. I mean, just go on Twitter, you see it everywhere, right? How to be more productive at work, the shift to wellness in the workplace, biophilia and its effect on your employees. Human health is one of the fastest and arguably, in my opinion, the most important growing industry in the world. They expect it to be the next trillion-dollar industry. A majority of designers and builders also expect that health and wellness will have a higher influence on design and construction decisions just over the next 2 years. And it gets interesting when you start fusing the fastest growing industry, one of the fastest growing industries in the world, with the largest asset class in the world, which is real estate. And you get this very interesting notion of wellness real estate. And when you're looking at these numbers here, so this is all about investing in people for your greatest return on investment. So these numbers here, they've changed a little bit, but these are basically based on the costs of when you're basing it on a 30-year life cycle study of a building, the costs attributed to that building. So about 1% to 2% of the costs are your design and build costs. 8 to 9% will be your operational costs, but the 90+% that you're spending when you're looking at a 30-year life cycle study of a building is on the people inside, their salaries, their wages, their benefits, their productivity, their output. And what's interesting is when you start comparing this wellness movement to something like the green building movement. So the green building movement today is about a $45 trillion industry. It's been around for about 15 years. And as we know, it focuses really on reducing those low single-digit costs, like ongoing energy costs, waste management, things like that, which happens to be 8, 9, 6%, depending on the building. That alone has spawned a $5 trillion industry. So what does that mean for the well building standard? I don't know. Something pretty enormous, I think. It's getting a lot of talk, especially in the Toronto GTA community with our designers right now. Physical workplace, definitely one of the top 3 factors that does affect job performance and satisfaction. Here's just a couple stats on where we are today in corporate health and wellness. Unfortunately, a lot of the stats are US based, but they're fairly comparable in Canada. So they're expecting that within the next 3 to 5 years, 99% of employers will offer some type of health and wellness program. While wellness programs used to be viewed as this kind of nice extra for employees, now they're really starting to be viewed as a strategic imperative. Case in point, Johnson & Johnson, since 1995, their leaders estimate that their wellness programs cumulatively saved the company about $250 million on healthcare costs alone, and they were measuring return on investment of $2.71 for every dollar spent from 2002 to 2008. Healthy employees, not just less likely to get sick, but also more likely to stick around within a company with voluntary turnover rates as low as 4%. Another example was an educational firm I heard of in the States called Nelnet, and they, when they were doing their departing interviews for their employees, they asked them what they would miss most, and the number one answer was the wellness program. So how do green building and health and wellness go hand in hand? They're designed to work together. So much so that if you were going for a WELL Platinum certification, there'd be about 20 to 25% overlap with LEED Platinum certification. It's because a lot of the features in the air and light concepts actually overlap with LEED features. They work seamlessly together because the IWBI, which is the International Well Building Institute, they are the ones who administer the well building standard. They actually join forces with the GBCI, as who we know administers LEED, to ensure that the certification works seamlessly together. All right, let's jump into the certification process. So it's a little bit more streamlined than LEED. So it's all online for one. Starts with registration. You register the project online through the WELL portal. This portal is designed to take you basically from start to finish. The next phase is the documentation requirements. These are required prior to the final certification review. They are for certain features that you can actually find in the back of the Well Guidebook, which is available for free online. You'll see certain features either require annotated documents from a mechanical engineer or letters of assurance from the architect, things like that. Once those are approved, it's the performance verification stage. This is a series of post-occupancy performance tests that take place either over a day, a couple days, depending on the size of the project. These are all done by what is called the Well Assessor. Note that is different than the Well AP. So the Well AP is going to be working on a project similar to a Lead AP, where they're going to be guiding you towards achieving certain features. The Well Assessor is kind of like the next level above that, where he's sent by the IWBI, and he will actually perform the tests that are measuring things like the light levels, acoustic levels, air quality, things like that. Certification will happen after that if that is approved. There are 3 levels of certification, which we'll jump into in a second. I should note as well that there are 3 different project typologies that you can register under. There are new and existing buildings, new and existing interiors, and core and shell projects. You have to recertify every 3 years for new and existing buildings and new and existing interiors. You do not have to recertify for core and shell projects. Cost, obviously this is a big question that comes up. On average, the fees to the IWBI is about a 1 to 3% premium. Where things start getting a little tricky is depending on what stage you start the well certification process in. So if it's a new building, it's a lot lower usually, the cost of being well certified, as opposed to retrofitting, a very old building to meet well standards. That's when you can start running into extra costs with changing the HVAC and things like that. So we talked about this, the performance verification, the Well AP. The 3 levels of certification are silver, gold, and platinum. Silver is when you meet what are called all the preconditions for well building standard. Gold is when you meet all the preconditions and 40% of the optimizations. Platinum is all the preconditions and 80% of the optimizations. So it's almost like, to sum it up, well is like this nutritional label for your building that's providing that transparency on the quality of the built environment for your employees and your clients who are spending time in that built environment. Okay, let's jump into the 7 concepts of well. So the 7 concepts of well are air, water, some more intuitive, right? Air, water, but then we get into things like nourishment, light, fitness, comfort, and mind. Each one of the well features applies to a specific body system. So when you're actually going through the well guidebook, you will see, well feature 37, drinking water promotion, applies to the immune system, digestive system, and urinary system. You'll see each concept clearly outlining which body system it's directly impacting. So let's start with a more intuitive one, air. So we're breathing about 15,000 liters of air in every day, but what a lot of people don't realize, air is actually the #1 environmental cause of premature mortality. And the air we breathe not only just affects our respiratory system, it affects our nervous system, our immune system. A scary fact is that also in about 70% of the square footage in the world, the indoor air quality is actually worse than the outdoor air quality. Crazy, right? But thankfully, with technology, there are wonderful ways that we can clean and purify our air. And the intention of the well standard is to essentially formalize a process that validates this. Better air quality can see productivity improvements up to 8 to 11%. Like I said, concentrations of some pollutant indicators are 2 to 5 times higher indoors when compared to outdoors. Well looks at removing 6 major air pollutants: carbon monoxide, lead, nitrogen dioxide, ozone, 2 particulate matters, 10 and 2.5, and then sulfur dioxide. Biggest source of indoor air quality concern is always inadequate ventilation. The third input of the air category is ventilation effectiveness, which essentially will set a foundation for the ventilation rates based on the amount of carbon dioxide levels. Ventilation design is based on best practices from other industry standards, such as ASHRAE, and comply with their requirements. It gets really interesting, too, when you start to look at how designing with human health at the forefront can reduce some of the overcompensation that we've almost been trained to do in our modern world. And I'll explain what I mean by this. Migraines, headaches, for example. One of the number one triggers for migraines and headaches is too much formaldehyde in a room. And essentially, our bodies have evolved to send us this signal, which can come in the symptom of a headache or a migraine, that's saying, look, something's wrong in this space. We're advising you to get out, kind of thing, right? That's kind of how nature has evolved in telling us there's a problem. But what do we normally do? I mean, normally we're not going to walk into a room, get a migraine, and say there's something wrong with this room, I'm leaving. Chances are we're going to pop a pill and tell our body to shut up, right? That's kind of what we've been trained to do. So it's very interesting when you start looking at how well can actually reduce the amount of unnecessary overconsumption that we do with either prescription medication or things like that. Let's jump into nourishment, a little less intuitive here. So how does a building design impact the food that its occupants choose to ingest? Well, a couple ways. Just look at the cafeterias, for example. So if you look at something like the size of our plates, you'll notice that since the 1950s, our plate sizes have almost doubled to what they are today. And since the 1970s, the daily caloric intake went up from 2,000 calories per day to 2,600. Type 2 diabetes is a pandemic across North America. And what is the number one cause of type 2 diabetes? It's portion control and overeating. So just telling you this simple, information, what things do you think you could maybe do to influence better eating decisions? Well, one of the ones is definitely portion control and regulating plate sizes, cup sizes, and bowl sizes. Also things like sugar, which we know is not a good thing. According to brain scans, sugar is actually as addictive as cocaine. Why? Why are we so hooked on sugar? Well, if we use a 1,000-year-old example, so basically thousands of years ago, there wasn't that much sugar around. So when our bodies found sugar, it hung on to it because it gave us that much-needed energy boost. What we haven't quite figured out is what to do when we have sugar available 5, 10, 15, 25 times a day. And today, it's not usually, a perfect ripe berry. It comes in the form of a Skittle or, a double Frappuccino or whatever those things are. So it's some artificial sugar that's very hard to digest and assimilate. It doesn't come with, the fiber, the sugarcane fiber. And so it just basically shoots our glycemic index up and down and gives us those spikes. So that's why we've been trained to really search out for sugar-laden foods over thousands of years, haven't quite figured out what to do when it's available so much. So the Well-Building Standard also looks at reducing the amount of sugar that is sold through single-serve items like Pops. So basically, you can't have more than 15 grams of sugar sold in a single-serve item. So all Pops essentially are not going to be happening in a well building. Behavioral economics. If you haven't heard this term before, best way to understand it is grocery stores. So if you walk into a grocery store, a lot of people, when I bring this example up, you'll notice next time when you walk in, but you walk into a grocery store, first thing you see when you walk in, it's not actually the produce section. There's always a little stand that seems to be the first thing you walk in and see, and it's got, baked goods, sweets, cakes, this kind of thing. And it really doesn't have any place in that spot, but it's just always there. And as we know, when we check out when we're leaving the grocery store, what do we see? It's all the candy, chocolate bar, pop, that kind of stuff. This isn't just a fluke on how grocery stores were designed. They're doing this to influence your purchasing decisions, by right when you walk in, seeing all those things that deep down your body is saying, yeah, I want sugar, I want this, I want that. And when you leave, going, oh, it'd be great to have sugar and sugar and sugar. When you start to flip this idea on its head, you can again think about the cafeteria example. So if you're walking down a line in a cafeteria, and you're filling up your plate, and at the beginning of the line, let's say, are all the processed junk, sugary foods, and you're filling up your plate, and by the time you get to the wholesome, organic, natural foods, salads, fruits, what have you, maybe you only have a tiny bit left on your plate where you can fill that up. That essentially is affecting your food choices. So once you understand behavioral economics and how to implement in a natural, healthy way, that's what the well-building standard looks at doing. So let's talk about water, a little bit more intuitive as well, but it's important to note that unlike LEED, which looks at the water usage of a building, well-building standard will focus on the water quality and availability to the occupants inside. Big thing is dehydration too. So it's been estimated that 80% of the U.S. population goes through their normal day in at least a mildly dehydrated state. Dehydration affects your attention, your focus, your psychomotor skills. A lot of people think they might drink enough water, but actually it's a lot that we need to take in. For women, it's 2.7 liters a day recommended. For men, 3.7 liters a day. Now, it's important to note that it's not just water that we get our hydration from. We find water in different foods and things like that. But what WELL looks at doing is promoting proper hydration with this idea of if people see water, they will drink water. So feature 37 of WELL is called Drinking Water Promotion, and it looks at encouraging water consumption through locating a water dispenser visibly within 30 meters of all regularly occupied floor space. If people see water, they will drink water. If you pass a hydrating station maybe once every day because it's hidden around the back, that when you're going to get some copies or something, that you pass and you go, yeah, I should have some water. Well-building standard looks at encouraging water use by placing them visibly in all regularly occupied spaces. Bottled water, this is another big debate. Obviously, I think most people can agree that bottled water has serious impacts on the environment. But what a lot of people don't realize is that bottled water is not always the healthier option. I think, with clever marketing, some people think that, bottled water might be cleaner than water coming from the tap. But nonetheless, even the quality of bottled water is subject to degradation. They did a study in Europe recently that looked at antimony in water, in bottled water. So antimony, basically high exposure can lead to a variety of skin, hair, and nail problems. And they looked at the levels of antimony in 48 brands of European drinking water and found that the levels increased 90% after 6 months of storage, basically due to the antimony leaching off the PET bottles that were designated as recyclable. So bottled water is not always the healthier option as well. Reusable water bottles that are getting properly filtered water is always the best way to go. Light. So this is one of the ones that I found the most fascinating when I was learning about the WELL building standard. The instructor kept saying that light is medicine. Light is medicine. And I'm like, what is she talking about? And then she started explaining, again with her 1,000-year-old example. So thousands of years ago, before we started putting boxes around us and spending 90% of our time indoors, we used to live outside. We'd breathe air that was not contaminated with harmful toxins. And every day the sun would rise. It would move across the sky and it would set. And our bodies would normally be more energized and productive in the daytime hours when the sun had that, bright white blue light coming. And then as it started to set and the light would change, our cortisol levels would drop, our melatonin would increase, and we'd rest in the nighttime. And it was only 12 years ago that doctors discovered something in our eye called the circadian optic nerve. First time that medical science realized our eyes were more than just for vision. So there is this nerve in your eye called the circadian optic nerve. It has nothing to do with optics, with vision. Basically, its only job is to regulate your entire 24-hour sleep-wake cycle. So if you haven't heard of that term, circadian lighting, you'll hear about it more and more. You go to any lighting expert now, and that's basically all they're talking about. And it gets even more interesting. Doctors are even starting to find that certain types of lighting will have a positive impact on things like digestion. So even the light around you that you're having around the dinner table is important for your health. Circadian lighting is something, though, that corporations are really starting to take notice in, because they're thinking about the productivity of their workforce. For example, with a workforce that's, let's say it's the winter, they're coming in from lunch around 1 o'clock, especially in those northern cities. That sun is starting to set around 3:30, 4 o'clock. And so you've got your workforce coming in after lunch. So they're already feeling a little sluggish. That sun is starting to set. And, they're basically fighting to stay awake because all the signals are telling them that it's time to rest. So instead of, leaving or falling asleep at their desk, what do? We overcompensate again. Grab some sugar, grab some coffee, muscle through, push through the last couple hours of the day, and then you'll be fine. But corporations who are implementing proper circadian lighting and ensuring that in those, dark hours of the winter, that their workforce is getting that proper white-blue light sent to them, they will ensure that they'll get that productivity out of their workforce because they will be more alert and awake. The founder of Well, actually, I remember seeing an interview with him, and he was talking about how he actually has a special light in his washroom that when he wakes up, first thing he does when he wakes up in the morning, he goes to his washroom. It's a specialized white-blue light that he essentially turns on and stares at for 5-6 seconds, and it blasts this white-blue light into him. Not too crazy or anything, but it blasts this white-blue light, and he says it's like having 5 cups of coffee in the morning. So harness the power of light. Use light as medicine. Like I said, we're spending about 40% of our lives looking at screens. But when we look at artificial light from our computers or phones or tablets, what have you, before going to bed, it is basically sending the wrong signals and the worst possible signals to your brain, which can make falling asleep very difficult. It's not just an old wives' tale on don't look at your screens before you go to bed because blah, 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 blah. It's basically sending this white-blue light to your brain, and your brain doesn't know that you're lying in bed. Your brain's saying, oh, I'm seeing this light. It must be daytime. Keep the cortisol up. Keep the melatonin down, and then as soon as you turn off your computer, you wonder why you can't fall asleep right away. So I think, luckily, more and more people are starting to realize the effect that this does have on sleep. Apple phones, for example, and the last software update, if you have an Apple phone, you can go to your settings, and there's a mode called Night Switch. And this will essentially change your screen based on the time of day it is. There's also a great program for computers called Flux, which essentially will, if you go back here, so you'll see in the evening colors, it's kind of that amber yellow color. So my computer will automatically change kind of to that amber yellow lighting in the evening hours to send that proper signal to my eyes and my brain. Okay, let's jump into fitness. So this is going beyond things like having an on-site gym for every company. This is looking at things like active design. Active design being that if you place a staircase in an inviting location and make it beautiful and you have it next to windows with access to light, that'll encourage more and more people to take the stairs. If you design a stairwell that's hard to find, that has no signage pointing towards it, that's dingily, lit, that's, has no that's hot or whatever it may be, chances are people are not going to take the stairs. There's a great example of how they achieved this in Denmark, actually, where they wanted more and more people to take the stairs in the subway system because physical inactivity is the fourth leading risk factor for mortality. So what they did was they actually painted each step of the staircase like a piano and had each step trigger a sound. Overnight, people started jumping on these stairs and taking the stairs more and more. So it's getting creative with how you're encouraging people to be active. What happens to your body when you sit for a prolonged period of time? Sitting is the new smoking, right? We've heard the term. Is it the new smoking? I don't know about that. That's kind of just a clever marketing term I think someone came up with. But prolonged sitting does have a cumulative stress impact. It translates into your standing. Basically, when you sit for long periods of time, you're training your body to tighten certain muscles. You also don't get diaphragmatic breathing, which gives less oxygen to your brain and your body. If you ever get tired in the middle of the day, just stand up, take a few deep breaths, and I tell you, it's like having a cup of coffee. It's important to know, though, that it's not just enough to say, well, yeah, I sit all day at my job, and then I go home, and then I, go for a run, I go to the gym, blah, 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 blah. Our bodies weren't meant to work like that as well. Our bodies are meant to rev, rest, not rev and then rest, or rest and then rev. That's why it's when you're using something like a sit-stand desk, it's called a sit-stand desk. It's not just, now I have a sit-stand desk, so I stand all day and I'm the healthiest guy in the office, look at my calves kind of thing. It's sit-stand, move, walk around, that kind of thing. Comfort. So this is based on some of the biggest complaints in any workplace. If you guys didn't know, the biggest complaint in any workplace is not ergonomics, it's not chairs, it's not temperature. Those are number 2 and 3. But the biggest complaint is actually acoustics, noise considerations, especially as we're moving towards this open collaborative workplace. Temperature considerations are number 2. It's important to know that men and women have about a 6-degree difference in what each finds as a comfortable temperature. However, building code is usually set to the male condition. So I think this is why a lot of times there are a lot of complaints in what is the correct temperature to set an office to. So the ability to have dynamic adjustment of temperature is available with the technology we have, and it makes a huge difference on how comfortable one can be at work. Ergonomics, this is a huge one as well. Most adverse effects of poor ergonomics are seen in musculoskeletal disorders, things like low back pain, neck pain, osteoarthritis. Low back pain affects about 31 million Americans a day. 31 million Americans, and about 380,000 days of work were missed in 2013 because of musculoskeletal disorders. Lastly, just to quickly touch upon mind. So mind category and concept has to do more with awareness and education. Are the mind and body connected? Yes. For example, when we exercise, we release serotonin, which will elevate our mood, regulate our sleep cycle. And on the same side, the simple act of worrying can trigger physiological responses similar to the way that injury and physical stress can. So the mind and body go hand in hand. Well-being standard looks at things like biophilia. If you don't know what biophilia is, it's the idea that there is this instinctive bond between human beings and other living systems. They've seen 6% increase in concentration levels for those who see a green roof, whereas 8% drop for those who see a concrete roof. It gets really interesting, though. So this is a photo of the first ever well building, which was the CBRE global headquarters in Los Angeles. And when I was watching an interview with the CEO of CBRE talking about his experience in this well building, he said he was talking to the founder of Well, and he kept telling him, he goes, I didn't expect 2 things to happen. One, I didn't know how addictive health and wellness could be. And the second thing was, he goes, I'm hearing these conversations, as I'm standing by the elevator, overhearing my employees talk about how they're actually changing their habits at home based on what they are learning at work. And that gets really exciting and interesting, I think, when you think about when WELL starts being implemented in schools or hospitals or hotels. Health, the possibilities are endless. And hopefully what ends up happening is that the standard is wellness. CBRE are definitely leaders in this movement towards wellness. They just did 3 floors in their Toronto West office in Mississauga in Toronto that were WELL certified. And I believe actually they have another building in Toronto that I'm going to look at that is also being certified, 1 floor as well. So hopefully, it's still a fairly new standard with the first building launched in 2013, but hopefully as more and more people become aware of the value of WELL, we will start seeing more and more companies start to become WELL certified and buildings. So that is the value proposition of WELL. So it's providing that improved environment for employees and clients, investing in people for the greatest return on your investment, establishes you as an industry leader, increased productivity of your workforce, and improved employee satisfaction and ultimately retention as well. So here's a couple stats on just where we're headed right now to close off. So right now, 88 of the Fortune 100 companies are LEED certified. IKEA's chief sustainability officer, if you didn't see this article earlier this year, basically declared that we are at peak stuff in the West. He goes, we're at peak stuff, we're at peak sugar, we're at peak meat. And it's fascinating. IKEA is actually going to start introducing repurposing, remanufacturing facilities in North American IKEAs. So, instead of every time you move 2 steps down the road, you throw your IKEA furniture out and just buy new stuff. They're actually going to introduce places where you can bring it back to the IKEA and they'll reuse parts to try to avoid the amount of waste that is filling up our landfills. Right now, Canada's total methane emissions, 38% of it come from our landfills. So it is a serious issue. We need to try and reduce and repurpose and reuse as much as we can. To close off, I just want to talk quickly about B corporations. So B corporation stands for benefit corporations. And it's interesting to note that Delos, the company that pioneers the WELL building standard, is a B corporation. And it's kind of this, best of both worlds of the WELL building standard and LEED being brought together in a better way of doing business. So they might be companies you already know and use. And the movement is worldwide, and it basically recognizes for-profit businesses that have measured social and environmental impacts. So they're people who are using business as a force for good. B Corps meet high standards of overall environmental performance, transparency, and accountability, and they inspire to use the power of business to solve social and environmental problems. So similar to WELL, you get this scorecard that essentially highlights the impact that your company is making on not only the environment, but on your workers, on your community, things like that. So it's kind of bringing the best of both worlds of LEED and WELL into the way that we're doing business. It's this idea of triple bottom line companies who are focused on people, planet, and profit. So that's it for me. I hope you guys learned a little bit more about the WELL building standard, and again, a little bit about what we do at Envirotech. So we are a leader in remanufactured office systems, but at the same time, we also we work with 20 new vendors as well. And we're trying to create this movement towards, a lot of designers who take advantage of us are using us for blended solutions to achieve the exact look that and function that their space is going for, but staying within their client's budget. Feel free to send me an email if you have any questions. You can reach me at, my email is adelisi@envoff.com. That's adelisi@envoff.com. Thank you very much, guys. Have a great day.